All right, everybody. I got something interesting for you that you guys are might gonna like. Probably give you a range of emotions as I go through this video. This is something I do every couple years when it comes to here in Nevada. So some of the new laws that tourists and locals both need to know about here in Las Vegas and really statewide across Nevada. So I'm actually over here near the Strip right now. I was just playing some slots. I'm sitting outside of Chick-fil-A filming this, but I got my notes here for you to do. So I got my paper here. We'll go over some of these things. Usually the Las Vegas Review-Journal, every legislative session puts out a good article where they list like 130, 150 different laws or bills that were passed. And they didn't do that this year. So I had to pull from a few different articles. Some of these I'll go over some detail. Others I'm just going to list off. So I try to give you guys the most comprehensive view that I can. But this is kind of an interesting topic, and this stuff does affect you. So if you're going to be visiting here or living here, these are things that can be important to you. So one thing to keep in mind with Nevada, for decades, Nevada has been a swing state politically. So the government here, between the governor, the assembly, and the Senate, is often split in some way, shape, or form. So I think in 92, the Democrats controlled all three. And then, man, I forgot how many years it was, till 14 or so. The Republicans actually controlled all three, but between that time it was split. And then there was 4 years recently where the Democrats controlled all three of those, and then now it's back to split. So there's a Republican governor now, but the Assembly and the Senate are both controlled by Democrats. So Governor Lombardo, he signed 536 bills into law. Although the big thing he was known for is he set a record. He vetoed 75 bills. So Governor Sandoval, in his 8 years, vetoed 97 in 8 years. So Governor Lombardo, his first legislative session, vetoed 75. So he's well on his way to beating that. 43 of them he vetoed on the last day of the session before they could become law. If he just, did not veto them, they would have automatically become law at midnight. Very different. Former Governor Sisolak was a Democrat. His first session, he signed 638 new bills into law, so over 100 more, and he only vetoed 3. So one of the things we'll talk about here, some of these, not in any particular order, but first one we'll talk about, they got a lot of attention. And sorry guys, it's actually sprinkling right now, so I'll do the best I can with the elements. Was street vendor business licenses. This was something that was an issue with the Southern Nevada Health Department over sanitation standards because there were unlicensed food vendors that were, selling products. And I guess this was getting bigger and bigger on the Strip, although surprisingly, for the amount of time I spend on the Strip, I didn't notice this a whole lot. I know I saw some stories about like the bacon wrap hot dog vendors, which before I moved here from California, man, dude, those bacon wrap hot dogs were amazing at like 3 and 4 in the morning. They really were. People getting out of the clubs, those were amazing. But they were causing some issue here because issues over sanitation, not being licensed to do it, and that kind of thing. So, but they're out trying to make money. So part of the problem was, they'd be out trying to make money, and then what would happen is like this, if the health department or like the police showed up, well, they would just confiscate their products from them, which was also a problem because you have people trying to make an income, but you also have, their product getting taken that they had to actually pay for. So this was something that gained more attention and more traction really throughout the legislative session. But it was interesting because at the city level, lots of cities were against it. The city of Henderson, North Las Vegas, Reno, and Las Vegas were all against it. Clark County was against it. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department was against it. A lot of these local municipalities were worried about being able to have any local control over it, local licensing. But this did pass, and now the proposal did have broad support from community members, advocacy groups, and elected officials. For a long time, they'd argue that the health department should create a separate category for push cart vendors so that they can meet the requirements with, their smaller and cheaper equipment. But now they can get licensed. So this is across the state. They can now get licensed. I think the local governments do have some control over it, but across the state, they can now be licensed. So, that was one thing to try to help mitigate, the issue that was coming from that. So one thing about this too, I do want to say though, some people think that this is going to keep vendors safe from getting like attacked from people. Like, it'll help keep you safe from like, government issues because now you can be licensed, but if someone's going to target you and assault you and attack you, they're not going to care if you have a license. So I have heard some people say that on social media, and unfortunately, if someone's going to do something criminal to that point where they're going to physically harm you, they're going to do it whether or not you have a license from the government or not. So I don't say that it's scared anyone, I just say that so people can be aware and not have a false sense of safety that comes from just having a paper from the government. Let's see, what else do we have here? AB 232, this was a cap on the tax of premium cigars. So 50 cents is now the cap on cigar taxes. Let's see, significant savings on cigars that are 10 or more. Oh, the previous tax was about 30% on cigars, but this 50% cap expires June 30th, 2027. Another bill related to smoking, AB 122. You can now buy cigarettes at casinos again. So some of you made your life a little easier to buy cigarettes on the casino floor. AB 272, mail theft is now a felony under state law. So that's a sentence of 1 to 4 years in prison with a fine of no more than $5,000. SB 163, health insurers, including Medicaid, must cover gender-affirming care for transgender minors and adults. So insurers sometimes are calling this a cosmetic surgery, so they would not want to cover it. But now it says they have been shown to significantly ease gender transition. Parental notification is still required for treatment involving minors. Similar, in the same vein, Senate Bill 153, the Department of Corrections, they're now required to adopt certain standards surrounding transgender, non-binary, and intersex offenders. Staff will have to undergo cultural competency training for interacting with these inmates. Nevada State College is now to be renamed, now known as Nevada State University. Firearm purchases. Every gun locking device, or every gun you buy will now have to come with a gun locking device at purchase. SB 322, known as Rex's Law, raises sentencing requirements for this violation here. Violators now face 6 to 10 years in prison for reckless driving involving 50 miles per hour or more over the speed limit in a school or pedestrian zone. On October 1st, bill will go into effect, giving law enforcement more flexibility during street takeover events, aka sideshows. I moved here from the San Francisco Bay Area. I am more familiar with those than most. So this came AB 408. So police can now tow vehicles of reckless drivers without having to make an arrest. So this came from that. So this is in response to a number of situations in Clark County where a group of people participate in what is called, this representative called it trick driving. I've always heard the term sideshow, where they take over intersection, perform tricks, and burn rubber. So Metro has been fighting that. More recently, I guess, understandably, lots of truckers like it because they're doing these in parts of the Vegas Valley. Lots of truckers have to pass through. Juneteenth is now a state holiday in Nevada. So the measure passed with overwhelming support by Democrats and Republicans, 40-1 in the state assembly and 19-2 in the state senate. If you have jury duty here now, you will get $65 a day instead of $40. Women who fill their prescription for birth control pills can now get a 12-month supply in one visit. License plates no longer have to be renewed every 8 years. A landlord can no longer charge a tenant for repairs or maintenance of a unit if such work is required to keep the area habitable. It will be illegal to place a tracking device on someone's car without their permission. When I first read that, I was a little surprised that that was not already illegal. And I believe it's actually, even though it's illegal now, I believe it's actually only a misdemeanor, which is also a little surprising. I would think that would carry a more serious penalty to be tracking someone without their permission. But we'll see what happens. Let's see. Emergency plans for future must include the needs of people and their service animals. So the plan of action must also include at least one designated shelter for the animal and its owner. The evacuation and transport plan must be included. Nevada's minimum wage went up on July 1st. So that stems from the action taken in the 2019 Nevada legislature. That was back when it was, when the Democrats for those 4 years had full control. It was during that legislative session. So it's going to go up to $10.25 an hour for those with health insurance, $11.25 an hour for those without health insurance, the current minimum wage in 2023 after July 1st in Nevada. The Oakland A's, already heard, they were granted $380 million in public funding to build the stadium. Let's see. Assembly Bill 56 allows buses of public transit systems, emergency vehicles, tow trucks, and coroner vehicles to drive on the paved shoulder of a highway where there is signage that allows. You can now have teledentistry done in order to provide a diagnosis. You can no longer, new bill, it says you cannot restrain your dog using tethers, chains, choke collars, or similar restraints for more than 10 hours in a 24-hour period. One exception is if you're out camping. Senate Bill 365 requires a peace officer to ensure that medical aid is given to a person who indicates they cannot breathe. The bill also allows the DMV to begin imprinting a symbol on the person's ID that indicates that they have a medical condition, so if they show it to the officer knows. Let's see. Governor Lombardo signed SB 406, which was spearheaded by Secretary of State Cisco Aguilar, that makes it a crime for any person to threaten, intimidate, coerce, or use any act of violence against an official with the intent to interfere with an election and be punishable between 1 and 4 years in prison. There is a lawsuit going on against this right now from 4 Nevadans who used to be election observers. Their concern is that how it will be implemented. That is basically too broad. So their concern is that if an election observer just vocally objects to anything, that could be viewed as intimidation and the observer could face criminal penalties. So they're alleging that the new law violates the First Amendment because it's overly broad and criminalizes speech that an election worker could interpret as harassment or intimidation, even if the person objecting does not mean it to be that way. They're just being, they're just vocalizing their disagreement. Water restrictions. Assembly Bill 220, giving Southern Nevada Water Authority the ability to limit residential water use to as little as half an acre-feet per year per home if the federal government slashes Nevada's share of the Colorado River before a certain threshold or below a certain threshold. Nevada becomes the first state in the nation to give local water agency the power to limit individual home water use. So if the federal government does reduce Nevada's allocation from the Colorado River to 270,000 acre-feet or less, which we don't even use that much right now anyway, the new law would allow the Southern Nevada Water Authority's Board of Directors to impose water caps on individual homes to use about 163,000 gallons. The average home in Clark County uses roughly 130,000 per year, so about 80% of homes use less than the 163,000. Something that did not pass. So something that did not pass, we'll talk about stuff that was vetoed. Again, a little background for some of these. Others, I'm just going to run through them. So one thing that did not pass was the gas tax bill, SB 502. I heard about this in the news. The governor wanted to suspend the gas tax in Nevada for a year. That didn't seem to make much progress and went nowhere. So the gas tax he wanted to suspend for 1 year did not happen. Vetoed, like I said, 75 bills vetoed, set a record. None of them are overridden, though. It's actually pretty rare in the state of Nevada to have a governor's veto be overridden by the Assembly and the Senate. Now, in order to do that, the Assembly and the Senate, they would need a 2/3 majority vote in both of those to override the governor's veto. And in Nevada, the makeup in this legislative session, the Democrats had 2/3 of the representatives in the Assembly, so there's 42, 28 were Democrat, 14 Republican. But in the Senate, there's 21 seats. The Democrats had 13 of the 21. They needed 14 to have 2/3, and they had 13. So they were trying to override a veto. They would need to convince a Republican to go along with them. Did not happen. So, and that's not the first time in Nevada politics where it's come down to one representative just in one seat needed in order to get something done or pushed through, and it hasn't happened. So things that were vetoed: 3 different gun control bills, all vetoed by Governor Lombardo. Bills around debt collection, mental health, process for filling local government vacancies, money for legislative renovations. A union-backed train safety bill was vetoed. Imposing county taxes on fuel and motor vehicles. This was vetoed because it would have allowed Clark County commissioners to continue imposing additional increases on motor vehicle fuel tax via ordinance beyond 2026. Rather than requiring voter approval in 2026 general election to continue to increase the taxes. So the commissioners, or whoever was supporting this, wanted the commissioners to be able to just continue to increase taxes without a vote again by the people. But he said, no, if you're going to increase this tax again, you need to let the people vote on it in the 2026 general election. Vetoed a bill about health insurance subsidy for long-term substitute teachers. Language access for prescription drugs, counting ballots earlier and counting ballots twice for elections. Vetoed a bill about gender-affirming care protection for medical providers because he said the measure would decrease the executive branch's authority to ensure the highest public health and child safety standards for Nevadans. So he signed 2 gender-affirming care bills but vetoed 1. All right, signed 1 new law about gun laws but vetoed 3. Also vetoed medical aid in dying. So he's the first governor ever to veto a bill allowing, in some situations, patients with terminal illnesses to self-administer life-ending medications. Vetoed a bill expanding DMV hours for voter registration. AB 305 So this one would have required at least 2% of the hours of labor and public works department to be completed by women apprentices. Lombardo said it was well intended, but after reviewing the benchmarks provided in the bill, it would be nearly impossible to reach the provided employment targets, because he said there's just not enough women in these positions right now. I think he said there's only 250 women across the entire state in these. In some trades, there's 0. So he said it's just statistically impossible for these compliance to even take place. So he said Nevada should not be in the business of creating laws with which compliance is virtually impossible. Vetoed a bill about banning hand counting ballots. Continued funding universal free school breakfast and lunch. Vetoed rent caps for those living in mobile homes because it was seen as a form of rental control that would reduce housing, or that would cause housing shortages, reduce property maintenance, and potentially decrease property tax revenue for local governments. And then also vetoed a bill that would have adjusted Nevada's summary eviction process. So he criticized the measure because he felt it imposed additional and unnecessary delays and costs on landlords who are trying to remove someone who's still unlawfully living in the property after their lease has been terminated. So he vetoed that one as well. And that's the long and short of it that I got for you guys, man. So try to give you as good a overview as I could without, going too in depth, because you can go really, really in depth on this stuff if you want. But yeah, tell me what you guys think about this. There's a whole bunch of different topics covered here. So whether you're traveling here, whether you live here or plan to live here, I'd like to hear what you have to say. So appreciate you guys watching. I'm Jacob, and this is My Life in Vegas.